Hello, I am Michael Payne. I am the Payne of Good Cooking, and welcome to my kitchen. Today, I'm going to show you how to take just an ordinary plain old banana nut bread recipe, add one extra ingredient to make it be the best that anybody else will ever taste. So let me show you what to do and let's get started. So it's kind of a secret, but it's not since I'm telling you. A week ago, I made a batch of homemade apple butter. I like apple butter. A lot of people don't really care for it, but it goes well on a lot of things. But I promise you, it is the key ingredient to a loaf of banana nut bread. So I made this homemade, but don't let me fool you. The store-bought kind is equally as good as what I made in my home. Now, if I go to the farmer's market or I pass a produce stand where the Mennonites or Amish are selling some canned products, if they have apple butter, I will buy it. But this apple butter, adding a cup of it to just whatever recipe you have is going to be fantastic. So today I always use Paula Deen's basic standard banana bread recipe. And then I add 1 cup of the apple butter because it has the cinnamon, it has the nutmeg, it has the moisture, it has all those elements that's really gonna kick up your bread. And then I add some nuts. Sometimes I don't, sometimes I do. Sometimes you feel like a nut. Today I feel like a nut. Several of them. So that's the secret. Now let's get started with actually making the recipe. All right, so first I want you to preheat your oven to 350 degrees. And then I'm going to take my standard bread pan and I'm going to take a generous amount of butter because I'm going to butter this pan or grease it really, really good. Now, I always wear a blue medical glove, rubber glove whenever I do this. It just saves me from having to wash my hands 1,900 and 400 times, or however many that was, to get all that butter off. I don't like having to deal with that. So if I can avoid it by using a rubber glove. But you can see I have that buttered and lubed up like we are ready to have some fun. All right, so let's get started with the dry ingredients. What this is in Paula Deen's recipe is I'm going to use 1 1/2 cups of all-purpose flour, and you use the proper technique to measure this, and I'm going to show you that just to reiterate it. So 1 1/2 cup of all-purpose flour. We're going to do 1 cup of sugar. We're going to do 1 teaspoon of baking powder, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, and then 1/2 teaspoon of kosher salt. So let's get started. So when it comes to measuring your flour, you know not to ever scoop your spoon in there because you're gonna pack it down and you're gonna get the wrong measurements. So what you do is, well, first you fluff a little up because if you're not dirty, then you ain't cooking. So I'm going to pour the flour into my actual measuring cup, and then I'm going to level it off with a flat edge. So that's 1. And I'm going to switch hands and do it the opposite to get my 1/2 of a cup. So that's 1, and this is going to be a 1/2. I'm making a little bit of a mess, but like I said, if you ain't making a mess, then you ain't cooking. So level that off. So now I have 1 1/2 cups perfectly measured all-purpose flour. So let me go with my other ingredients next. Let's do our baking powder. We're going to do 1 teaspoon of it, add it in, and then 1 teaspoon of our baking soda. This new design is giving me a little bit of a fit. And then we are going to take 1/2 teaspoon of kosher salt. I only use kosher salt. Kosher salt applies with me in all aspects of cooking. And I do a little bit of a heavy 1/2 teaspoon because, especially in baking, it needs a little bit of extra sugar. So we have that. And then what I'm going to do is, instead of sifting it, I kind of generically sift it because I have a sifter. I hate bringing that son of a bitch out and then having to wash it, and then it tends to get rusty if you don't care for it properly. I'm gonna just gently whisk my dry ingredients together so that they are sifted And then I'm gonna add my 1 cup of sugar. Now this, you can reach down in there. You don't have to pour it into your cup and level it off, okay? And then I'm just gonna give 1 more little spin around with the whisk. So there, I have my dry ingredients. So let's get ready for the wet ones. All right, so for the wet ingredients, we are going to use 1 teaspoon of vanilla, 2 eggs, 1 cup of my secret sauce, which is the apple butter, and then we're going to use 2 to 3 rotten ass bananas. They gotta be like almost rotten, near rotten, super ripe, because that's where all the sweetness and some extra moisture is gonna come from. So we're gonna start with our eggs, and you always do your eggs separately and then put in to your dry mixture, because if you don't, that's when you end up with eggshell, and then it's just a mess to have to deal with. Okay, so I've got my 2 eggs, and we're going to do 1 teaspoon of a good vanilla. Right now I'm using Rodel's. Then I'm going to scoop up, almost a cup of my apple butter. Y'all, all the spices in this, and then that moisture, really make this a delicious, super souped up recipe. And then we have our rotten ass bananas, and see, like that's what I mean. They need to be almost rotten. And we're going to take that. Let me just show you the easiest way that I do it. So you take your banana and you cut the edge off of each end, run your knife up along there, and then just peel your banana, and then throw it in the bowl. So I'm gonna do this for all 3 of them. Oh, this banana smells so good. It smells almost like some banana taffy or something. This is ripe. Oh, this is the way I like my bananas. Throw that in a bowl. We're doing the same with this 3rd one. Now, if you only have 2 really good ripe bananas, this recipe works fine with 2. I say 2 to 3. 3 is right up there, perfect. But 2 I have used because sometimes you just don't coincidentally have 3 rotten ass bananas at the same time. So 2 will be fine. So you're just gonna take those bananas and mash them with a fork. Very little effort, because these, like I said, they rotten ass. So I'm just gonna mash those up with my fork. Okay. Oh gosh. All right. So let's put that all together. Okay. And then we are going to stir this batter together. Now this batter is going to be really thick and sticky. You do not have to use a stand mixer or a hand mixer for this. Using just some good old muscles. Only takes a couple of minutes. You're just going to stir together and incorporate all of the ingredients together into one solid or one consistency. You don't want to overmix by any means, but you definitely want to make sure everything's mixed up. So use your judgment and try to make it decent judgment. All right, so I pretty much have this batter well incorporated. Everything is mixed. So now there's only one final step before we bake it in the oven. Do we want nuts or do we want to not have nuts? I want nuts. So let me show you a little secret about how to make the nuts actually work well for your recipe and not kind of screw it up. All right, y'all, when it comes to nuts, I'm going to use walnuts for this recipe, and there's no strict measurement. I usually use a good old fistful, which is almost 3/4 of a cup, maybe a cup, depending on how greedy I am. But whenever you use nuts, you always want to heat them up, not cook them, but you want to heat them up, because that heat is what activates the oils and releases all of those flavors. So instead of getting like just a stale nut crunch or taste in your bread, this is what's going to help you really get like that heightened, you can taste the flavors, and it really is essential. Anytime you are baking and cooking with nuts, you definitely want to toast them for only they'll burn quickly. So you really only want to do, you know, once they get hot, just for a couple of minutes. And once you smell them, that's when you kind of know that it's time to take them off the heat, okay? So I just got these started, and I'm gonna wait just a second and we'll be right back. All right, so it's just been 1, maybe 2 minutes after it got hot, and I can smell the nuts roasting. So I can smell them. I'm not trying to cook them, like I said. You're just gonna toss them around on the heat just a little bit, just to make sure that they are woken up. And now I'm going to remove them from the heat, and then we're going on to the next step. All right, y'all, for the next step, I'm just going to put my nuts on my cutting board. I'm just gonna do a rough chop just because some of these are really, these nuts be big. So I like to kind of chop them up just a little bit so that I can evenly distribute some moderately sized chunks. And then there will be some shavings also as well that gets mixed in to help spread that nutty flavor out. I mean, so like you're not trying to like pulverize these things, but you do want to make it to where you don't just bite into a huge nut. All right, so now I have those cut or chopped roughly, and I'm going to put them in a little bowl, because this one little final step is the secret technique, maybe. I'm not going to say it's a secret technique, but to some people it might be. So I'm just going to put just a little bit of flour on top of those nuts. Toss it around, because what this flour does on your nuts is it kind of coats it, so when you mix it with the batter, it's going to stay distributed from top to bottom rather than just getting heavy and sinking all the way to the bottom, and then you just have like a nut crust. We don't want a nut crust. We want them evenly distributed, okay? So I've got my flour coated nuts that have been heated. Just gonna dump them in and just give 1 or 2 whirls just to lightly incorporate. Okay? All right, so from here, we're gonna take our greased pan, and I'm just going to pour the batter in. This looks so exciting. All right, so now that that has been added in, all we have to do is put this in the oven and bake it. So Paula Deen's recipe calls for you to bake this at 350 for approximately 50 minutes. Now I have added extra moisture to it from the apple butter, and then my bananas are super ripe, so there's no foolproof set. This is exactly how many minutes you cook it. I tend to cook mine, I set the timer for 50 minutes and then I check it, but it usually takes a good 10 or 15 minutes extra for this loaf to come out just perfect. So I'm gonna put this in the oven and I'll be back with you when it's done. Y'all, I swear this is real life. This is what happens when I'm cooking. I forgot the freaking butter. I don't know what just came over me. I put the bread in the oven and I was like, something feels off. And then I turn around and I look, and there is a full stick of butter sitting on my counter. And I'm like, of all recipes, Paula Deen's recipe, I guess I said her name and just assumed the butter just jumped into my dish. So I have pulled that pan out, poured the batter back into my bowl. I sure hope I have not just royally blaked this up. But we're going to add a stick of butter now. I think it's going to be okay. I think we have saved the day. But whoo! So I'm just going to incorporate that in the best I could. I kind of already mixed the butter up, even though it was softened. I went on and did that in a bowl because I've already mixed everything and I don't want to over mix. Y'all, we're gonna make it happen, I promise. This is why I'm called the pain of good cooking, because sometimes it's painful to get to a good finished product. So now I have a stick of butter softened, and that was a little bit mixed up, incorporated after the fact typically you would add that in with all the other wet ingredients, the eggs, the apple butter, etc. So let's go and put this back in my pan, and then we're gonna put it back in the oven. I'll be right back with you. All right, y'all, my timer just went off, so we're about to kind of see what's going on here with this situation. It's been 50 minutes, 50, which is what the recipe calls for, but I usually have to go longer. So I have my toothpicks. Oh, wow. Okay, so now those came out just a little bit janky, so we're gonna put it back in for a few extra minutes, but not long because that bread's really looking good. Okay, so I have pulled my bread out because I let it cook for an extra 5 minutes. I'm going to take my 2 toothpicks and right in the center, well, I lost one, but they come out so clean. So I know my bread is ready. So I'm just going to let it cool for 5 to 10 minutes. All right, y'all, it is done. So it has cooled and the edges have pulled away from the pan just a little bit. So, God help me please make this empty out of the pan perfectly. I'm gonna give it up. Just to help. Oh, please don't let the bottom stick. Almost. There's just a little bit that kind of stuck, but I promise you, we're gonna do this. I am going to we reapply it and you just mash it down and then nobody will ever know. Okay, so you can see I have this beautiful loaf of banana nut bread, okay? And so let me just cut a slice. Oh my goodness, y'all. Look at this. Look at that perfect banana nut bread. It is moist, moist in the center. You can't see the steam, I can. There's chunks of nuts that are all throughout, so they didn't just settle on the bottom. You can see the coloration. Oh my goodness. So let me kind of turn this around. This is the way I serve it. So this is fantastic by itself. I'm just going to take a little bite just to prove to me and you. Okay. Shit damn. A few extra words, maybe. Y'all, okay, so this is so moist. And you really get that rich butter. Thank God I did not mess this up by adding the butter in after I put it in the oven and pull it out, blah, blah, blah. But this is so good. Oh my God, there's so much going on right now in that banana flavor. I'm trying to figure out if I even want to show you this next step. If you want to be extreme, which I am a lot of the time, so what I will do a lot of times is, especially like if I'm taking this to work to share with my coworkers or my employees or something, I will cut it up into little cubes. Because if you don't, somebody's going to come in and steal like 3/4 of the loaf in one bite and then mess it up for everybody. But you can then, make sure y'all can see me, I do a little powdered sugar. Isn't that delightful? But then, if you really want to be nasty and be good to your people, drizzle with just a little bit of caramel syrup. I'm gonna tell you, I don't know which bite I'm gonna get. All right, so this is the bite with some powdered sugar and some syrup, caramel syrup on it. Oh, I'm dripping everywhere. Y'all, I'm speechless. And I'm a verbose speech pathologist, so I'm never speechless. Oh, shit. I'm gonna need a moment alone. Try this recipe. I've got to disappear for a minute.